Welcome to Mona Tutorials. In this session we're going to be looking at Reactor basics and creating a couple of doors. Let's begin. So first I have created a door in Blender. Now of course this could be any application that you create your 3D objects. Now a key thing to note here is that the pivot point is at the door corner. So if I rotate, it opens where it should. If, for example, I had created the object here, then the pivot point might be in the middle of the door. So when you rotate the door here, it might give an effect you might not want. So make sure that your pivot point is correct in the original file, which will save a lot of time later. Now, there are ways around this in Unity, but this is the best way to do it. So I'm going to select both, Control A, and all transforms will go to the origin point. So I have set that up, and I have exported this to my Assets Models folder, selected objects, and then export FBX. And we have the door here. So we've got the door, the frame, and materials. Now to start, I'm going to create an empty, basically a folder for our one-way door. And then I'm going to move this because it will always be at 0, 0, 0. And I do not want it there. I want it over here. Press F to align. So when you rotate, it will be around that. And then we can drag our door into that object. Now notice how the pivot of the door turns at this point, which is kind of what we want. If you want to adjust a pivot point to an object, however, you could put it in a game object, move the door to where you want it to, and then use the parent as the rotation point. So feel free to use empty game objects as new rotation positions, but note you'll have variations in position because the object will always be relative to its parent. So let's keep this clean. So in this session, we're going to be focusing on Reactor first, just so we get an overview of that. So I generally like to create the Reactor object as a separate game object and have my own naming system, which is r_one-way door. If you want the Reactor script, you can find it in Mona, Template Scripts, Mona Reactor. So I can drag and drop it there. Or I can click on that and type in React, and then it will come up pretty quickly with that. Now what we want to do is when we run into a box collider on this object, we want the door to open. And then when you leave the box, you want it to close. So on enter, we want to start with a new condition and a label, which is just a label, door open. We want to set this object, which is the door, where we're going to put the animation on this object. So we want to set the Door Animator's parameter, which is a condition inside Animator. So let's say door open. Now be very careful with the naming, because if you get the capitals or anything else wrong, it will not work. So door open. You can have 3 conditions we can work with at the moment. So we want to set this to true. So a Boolean to true. So once again, door open, this is just for the tag or the name. Set the Door Animator's parameter of door open to true. And we'll get to parameters in a second. On exit of this collider, we're going to close the door. So door close. To close. Once again, drag the object with the animator in it. We'll get to that in a second. Now we only have one parameter for this animation, so keep that, but this time we're going to set it to false. So enter the collider or touch the collider. open the door, exit the collider, close the door. Now next we need to add the collider. So BOX, box collider comes up, add that, and we have this box here. So to edit this box, we can click this button here, adjust to where you want the door to work. So I usually go a bit bigger so it has time to open before you get to it. Now on trigger enter is when the avatar touches the collider first, not is fully into the collider. And exit as soon as they leave. So that's the reactor. Now what this does will affect the animator on this object. Now I want to put it on this object because it's the prefab and it's easy to access everything in it. I don't have to. I could put it on the door because that is the only thing animated, but I'm going to keep it here because it's just easier to click on that one rather than an object inside. So because this object has no animator or animation, we can use this tool to set it up for us automatically. So we're going to create. You will have your project file, assets, add your art here, and I usually put these in animation. So the first animation you add should be the default animation. So we want the door to be closed. And this is one door. One directional door. So do closed. And we need two states. So I want to also have open. So click on that to save on time. Change the name. And save. Now the system I'm using for this door is a one keyframe on each state and use the animator to transition between the two. So let's go to one door closed, press record, hold control, and then we can snap. And that's the frame. So in this case, we just want the door to animate. So hold control, snap open, snap closed, and then that keyframe is set to closed. Next, we want to do open, hit the record button, make sure the door is selected, not the door parent, and open the door as needed. Keyframe is made, and then we have our two animations. Now, because we use the create button here, an animator is already made on the object with the animator. So for example, because we made one door closed first, that is our default animation. So when the space is started, this animation will start here. This node doesn't matter so much. This one is the most important. If you want to change it, however, it's very easy. Click on the node, right mouse click, set layer as default state. So that will be where the animation starts in the scene. But we want the door to be closed on startup. Next up, we want to create a transition between these two states. So click on a node, right mouse click, make transition, and drag it to the node you want to go to. Left click to let it step. And the magic happens on this arrow. So as you can see, we have a lot of variation here. The has exit time means once this animation is finished, it can check the condition, but we want to do it at any time. So as soon as I enter the trigger, I wanted to do this. But you'll notice that this will come up with a warning because there are no conditions to trigger the event. Now for this to work, we actually need a parameter. So parameters are down here in parameters. You might default to layers, so click on parameters. And up the top right here, we have 4 options, but Mona currently supports 3. So float, int, and boolean. So decimal numbers, whole numbers, and true or false statements. Now in our case, we just want a true or a false, so we can do that. Now, once again, this is very important. Make sure your parameter name, door open, capital D, capital O, is the same as the parameter in here. So we'll go back to our animator to make sure we have it right. Double click, door, open. Now make sure not to click this on by mistake, because then the first state will never happen. So make sure that this will be off, so the default state can actually go to this second state. So if things aren't working properly, make sure this isn't set incorrectly. So now we have a parameter. We can go back to our transition. We can click on door open, and it will automatically choose true. Now note this time is 0.25 seconds. Now I'm going to make this one a bit longer. So let's make this a 1 second transition from closed to open. And the door is open to true. Click on this one, right mouse click, make transition, because we want to, at any time, transition to false and close the door. Now this one we're going to make very short. I can put this over here if I want to, but I'm going to make that and leave that as 0.25. We can actually do some quick checks here if I want to. So click on the arrow and go down here. You can see how the transition works there. And on here, notice how it's much faster. So we'll see that in action in a second. So that should be all of our conditions set. Let's test it out. Take a little while to kick in, turn around, and then we have our door. So walk in, open the door, walk out, close the door. Very fast. So notice how the transition between two keyframes can be adjusted in Animator for quick tweens between two states. So this is a very easy way to open and close doors, for example. The problem is if this door had a collider, I would be pushed out of the way. So I'm going to delete that to make sure that it updates next time. And I'm going to add a collider on the door. Not the door with the animator, because that's the frame as well, on the door that animates. So let's add a box collider. Make that a bit smaller. We'll see that in a second. So that's a one-way door. So you can probably imagine the problem with one-way doors. So we're going to make a two-way door. So create a two-way door object for organization. We're going to drag and drop our door into this. And as always, our scene, our game object will be put over here. So I'm going to put that there. Now a two-way door is a little bit more complicated. So this time, let's start with the animation now that you know what to expect with Animator and Reactor. So with our door here, we're going to notice how on this one, there's no animation here, so we can just create a new one. So we're going to go two door closed. Because that's the default state. Save a bit of time. And this time we actually need two different animations. And I'm going to use the reference to the portals that are in the scene. So two door away. And two door towards. So let's have a look. So let's go to closed. Make sure this is the correct object to animate. Now I don't want door one there, so I can just right mouse click or delete. Or if I want to, I can just press del or delete. So that's that animation done. We want away, so we want to make sure the portals are over there. So let's create an away record. Once again, make sure it's the right one. So door open there. That's away. And then, of course, select that and in. So we have our 3 animations. Once again, this might be because it'll default to a previous version, for example. So make sure that you're clicking on the right animation that you're playing with. So arrange these as you see fit to make a bit more sense. This is the default. I'm quickly just going to make the transitions. Left mouse click, right mouse click, drag. And then we can set up our states. So for this, we need 2 parameters because we're checking 2 directions. So I'm going to do door away is true and door towards. Don't click on those if that is the default state. And then we can set up our transitions. So turn that off, turn that on. Now this is the away animation. So we want the away equals true. And then we want that off. Door away equals false. Now this one is the towards. So turn that off. Door towards equals true. Off. Door towards equals false. And once again, you can test these. So we have away. And then we have close. We have the other way. And close. Now 0.5 is very short, so I'm going to make that 0.5. So this allows you, by using the single keyframe approach to simple situations like doors and elevators, you can actually change how the transition time is quite easily in the animator itself. But if you want to use a different techniques such as more control, you can use animation between the 2 states and turn off the loop. So it just stops at the end of the animation. So lots of options for your approach. So next up, we need to create our reactors. So I'm going to go back to here. And as noted, I like to keep my reactors in separate files. So we need 3 triggers. We need one like going close to the door on one side to open it one direction, and then a trigger on the other side to open it the other direction, and then a large collider that when you leave, it will close whichever direction you're going. So we need door close, which is the big one. Let's just duplicate that twice and rename it. So Control D to duplicate. Away. Naming is very important for these kind of situations. Reactor does get complicated very quickly, so make sure that you have a good naming system. Otherwise, things get really complicated the more complex you get. I do recommend building complex systems bit by bit, testing each one to make sure it works as you envision. Otherwise, you'll get to the end and it'll just be a complete mess. So let's start with away. So we need our Mona Reactor. Sure it's the right one. Drag and drop this time. So when we enter the door away, open. Open. Set the animator parameter, which is door away, Boolean to true. And we don't want an exit on this one because we want a universal exit. So we're going to add a box collider so we can see that, and then edit as you see fit. Once again, a bit bigger. So it has some time for you to get to the door. Now we want a way to happen, so we want to walk in this way, and then the door opens that way, which is away. Now we want to do basically the same thing with door towards. So I could copy that and change everything, but sometimes I like to make sure that I'm doing it correctly each time. So I'm going to make sure. So towards, open. Set object with animators, parameter to door towards. So that's the white run down here. Boolean to true. So we have those, and then we need the box collider. So when I enter from this direction, door towards will happen. And then we need door close. So this one is a little bit different because it's going to be bigger and on exit. So let's just do door close. Set the game object parameter. So we're going to do 2 at this case. So door towards, Boolean equals false. And then we're going to add another one. And once again, naming is better. So the towards, so this would be away close. And this would be towards close. Once again, keep it organized. Future you will thank you for it. So away close, set door towards. So that's not what we want. We want door away. Boolean false. And this time we want a much bigger box. So anytime the character leaves this box, the door will close regardless of which state it is in. So once again, we have our door with 3 states. We have our door close. When we leave this big collider, it will close both parameters, off. Door away, when I walk in here, the door will open that way. When I walk in here, the door will open that way. And then, yeah, will close when you leave that second box. Let's add a box collider on this one as well. And let's give it a shot. We have our 2 doors. So once again, open this one. Then, for example, this is why one-way doors aren't great. But two-way doors are fantastic. So that's a good example of doors and making a slightly more complicated door to make the experience a little bit smoother. Thanks for watching and happy building.